Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler. I'm the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. Welcome here and welcome back. If you're new and wondering what in the world this Order of Man podcast thing is all about, I'm having conversations with incredible men with the desire and goal to glean information and extract their practical wisdom and systems and mindsets that they've used in their lives to improve themselves so that we in turn can improve ourselves. So this one's a little different. This is your Friday field notes. Basically, you get to hear some of my ramblings, for better or worse, on some of the thoughts that I've been having from throughout the week. And this week, I've been thinking a lot about influence, credibility, and authority. Now, in the fall, I think the end of September, I've got a new book coming out called The Masculinity Manifesto, how a man establishes influence, credibility, and authority. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those concepts because it is very, very important that all of us work to build up all three. And I'll talk about why it's so important that we do that. I'll talk about how to rebuild it if you've lost some of those elements with people in your life. And then we'll put you to work. So guys, before I get into it, I do want to mention that we've got our Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood. That's opening up again in the middle of June. So if you want to be notified and you want to get enrolled, head to orderofman.com/Iron Council. Orderofman.com/Iron Council. You're going to get notified when we open up and you'll be able to join. It's going to be open for a very, very short window, but trust me, you'll want to take advantage of it. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the three terms: influence, credibility, and authority. Influence is your ability to change or modify people's thought patterns, beliefs, behaviors, actions. That's all influence is. And trust me, it's when I say that, I'm not talking about manipulation, coercion, blackmail, extortion. That's not influence. Those are something completely different. Influence is a moral way in which you get to have others change, again, their behaviors, their actions, their thoughts, and their attitudes. But it's moral. They have to voluntarily choose to do it, because if you're manipulating or forcing them in some way, that isn't influence. That's closer to tyranny or dictatorship, and it isn't going to really be a long-term win for you when it comes to helping other people thrive and succeed and be successful in life. So influence is your ability to get people to voluntarily shift those things because you're around. That's it. So now let's talk about credibility. Credibility is established through mastery. It's established through consistency. It's actually working towards something or multiple things and producing some level of capability in it that others recognize. So when people look at you, they say, okay, well, that guy's a podcaster. He's been doing it for 7 years. He's had 800 plus episodes with guys like Terry Crews and Tim Tebow and Ben Shapiro and Matthew McConaughey and Jocko Willink and David Goggins, Cam Hanes. And so in that instance, it's safe to say that I have established and garnered some level of credibility in my field. Now, if you wanted to talk with me about dentistry, and you looked at me as an authority, somebody who's credible, that's probably not going to work. But you see this all the time on social media. People are talking about things they have no idea what they're talking about, and they just look foolish, and they're not really kidding anybody, and you're not going to have any sort of credibility in other people's eyes. So when it comes to influence and credibility, we want to establish these things within the walls of our homes, with our wife, with our children. Like, you want your wife on board. There's going to be decisions that you want to make. And of course, you have to make those with her. But if you have more influence with her because of your credibility, and that credibility is established through leading the family successfully, then it's more likely she's going to go forward with some things that maybe she isn't 100% on board with. Homeschooling is a great example of that. We started homeschooling our kids about 3 years ago. And I've talked with a lot of men who would love to have their kids homeschooled, but their wives aren't on board. Well, part of the reason is because you don't have the level of influence, credibility, and authority that you need to be able to sway her or to help her make that decision more easily. Now, that's not to say that if you have those things, she'll make the decisions you want, but it's more likely that will happen. Your kids, you become the loudest voice for your kids if you have that influence, credibility, and authority. If you undermine yourself at every turn, they're going to look to outside sources, typically their peers. for information about how to operate in the world. And obviously, because you were a punk kid at some point, know that isn't always conducive to your growth. You want to have this within your community. It's very important to have this within your community because you're leading people, you're leading your neighbors, you're serving your neighbors. You want them to be there. You want them to be better people, right? And then also within the walls of your business, because you need your employees to perform. You want your clients to take your recommendations. You want your boss to notice you and give you a promotion. These are all reasons why you want to establish influence and credibility. The next thing we need to address is authority. Now, authority is that you're actually in the position of power, let's say. You need to know that the authority only comes after you have credibility, meaning you become masterful to some degree in a particular skill set. So that's the credibility. Then you have the influence with a boss, for example, or your wife or your children. And now you are in a position of authority that you can actually make those recommendations, those decisions, those ideas that you present and put forward. You really need a combination of all three of those. If, for example, within the walls of my home, there was another man, let's say a neighbor, who was influential in the eyes of my wife and children, and there are, who are credible, and there are, but he doesn't have the authority to lead my family. You see how that's a problem? I'm the one that has the authority to lead my family because I'm the man of the house, I'm the husband, and so that authority is mine and mine alone. Okay, now that said, yes, my wife leads with me and there's different roles that we each serve within the dynamic, so that's a different conversation. If you're at work and you have a particular skill set in accounting, let's say, and you have the credibility because you've been a great accountant for 10 years, and you have the influence with your boss and your peers and your coworkers, but you go over to the marketing department and you start bossing them around about how to market your products and services better. Okay, well, you really don't have the authority to do that. So you have to be very, very careful in overstepping your bounds. It's always interesting, and I talk about this in the book, about when people, they offer unsolicited advice. First of all, we don't know if you're credible. If for the most part, if it's on social media, a lot of times I don't know if you're credible. You're not influential because I've probably never heard from you before. And you certainly don't have the authority because I haven't given it to you. I haven't granted that to you. And I'm using me as an example, but it's the same for you. So if you want to really improve people's lives, you need to work on that trifecta. It's influence, it's credibility, and it's authority. Okay, so let's start with credibility, because that's really the foundation of all of this. You have to work every day towards a desired objective. I got up this morning thinking, man, I really don't want a podcast. I really don't want to record episodes. Like, all I want to do is do some chores and projects around the house and just kind of be lazy today. But I got up, I'm recording this podcast right now. When I'm done with this one, I'll record another one in about an hour after this one. And this is what's required. And because I'm so hyper consistent with this, I've become a credible resource in the podcasting world. I've become a credible source of information for you. So if you're thinking, man, I just wish my wife would listen to me more. I just wish my kids would pay attention. I just wish my colleagues would take my advice. I wish my boss would honor and recognize the work that I do. Turn it on yourself first. Because if all you're doing is waiting for your boss or your wife or your kids or your colleagues or your neighbors or whoever to recognize what you're doing, you're really at the mercy of whether or not they do it. But what you can be doing is focusing on the things that you can control, which is your own ability to become credible. And credibility, it is subjective, right? What's credible to one person might not be credible to another. But at the end of the day, we can always boost our credibility by working on something that's important. Maybe it's your fitness. Maybe it's your finances in your bank account. Maybe it's your podcasting skills, or the way that you train with firearms, or jujitsu, or whatever. And all of the other pieces of the puzzle, the influence and the authority and all of those things, and the improvement of people's lives, they all start to fall into place when you work on becoming a credible man. I hear from a lot of guys who will say things like, Ryan, I'd really like to start a business, but my wife, she's not fully on board. Well, honestly, maybe the reason is because every time you've started a business, you've been all hopped up for a couple of weeks or a month, or even maybe a couple of months, and then it just fizzles out and fades out. And she recognizes that pattern. And so what is her natural belief? This is just going to happen again. So you're not credible in her eyes. I hate to say that. And I don't hate to say that. I hate that that's actually the fact, because I've been there. There's been times in my life where I have not been a credible husband. And that lack of credibility led to a lot of real challenges and problems within our relationship. So guys, get better, improve yourself, work on yourself first. Okay. Next is influence. From credibility stems influence, right? Actually, I should back up. It's not as simple of a straight line as I'm making out, but you have credibility, influence, and authority kind of go hand in hand. The authority will come, that'll take care of itself. But when you're credible, influence is going to happen more naturally. And when you want to be influential, you need to learn a couple of different things. Number one, you need to learn how to communicate effectively with people. And you also need to learn how to be able to read people. Because if you come in like a hard A and you just try to blow everybody out of the water, that might work in certain scenarios. Maybe if you're a drill instructor, maybe if you're in high pressure corporate environment, even then it may not. But if you're trying to communicate with your wife, probably that level of communication is not going to work. And she's not going to be influenced by that. Well, she will be influenced by that in a negative way. She's going to say, screw off, and disengage from the conversation. And if you do that enough, you're really going to root out the bedrock, the foundation of your relationship. So you need to learn how to communicate effectively with others, and you need to learn how to read other people. Everybody acts so differently. And there's a real problem with communication in society that basically says, well, this is just what I am. And if you don't like it, well, then that's your problem. No, it's actually not their problem. It's your problem, right? If you're trying to communicate a message to somebody and you want to be influential in that person's life and that message isn't landing, is that their problem? No, because you're the one that wants that message to land. So it's your problem. So learn how to read people, learn to pick up on cues. How do you do this? You practice it. And then you look for feedback. If I say something to one of my kids, my oldest, for example, I can be a little harder and firmer with him. He's older. He's mature for his age. Him and I are very connected. I do have a lot of credibility and influence in his life. And so I can do that. But with my youngest son, he's got a more rebellious, wild nature. So if I tell him that, you know what he does? He just puts up a brick wall and he won't let me or anybody else in, then he'll just go on a tear. Okay, well, as his father, I need to understand that about his personality and then work my communication around a way that's going to help him succeed and me to influence him in a positive light. So again, communication skills, listening and reading other people, and then having a certain level of empathy and understanding about where people are coming from. I had a conversation this morning with a little business matter, little mini fire, had a conversation, and it would have been very easy for me to just come and just yell and charge and get defensive, but I knew that wasn't going to work. So instead, I tried to understand where this person was coming from. And I think I did a fairly good job understanding it, seeing why it was an issue. And, we were able to work through it because I was able to be somewhat empathetic to what that person was experiencing. Now, I may not fully understand it, but if I can understand it to some degree, I'm going to be more influential. And that's why we were able to come to a resolution, because I had the credibility and because I communicated effectively. That's the biggest thing, I think, when it comes to influence that men are lacking. They're lacking not only vision, but their ability to communicate it, their ability to read the room, their ability to be empathetic towards others. And then they just want to be hard A's, because that's what we see on social media. Oh, just yell at everybody and charge. No, that's not going to work all the time. Sometimes maybe, but really when you do that, you're going to foster, as my friend Brett Bartholomew has taught me, that you're going to foster compliance. Like you're going to get people to comply, but you're not going to get commitment. And there's a big distinction between the two. Compliance is like, hey, I'll do it because that person's in a position of authority. But guess what you don't have? You don't have credibility and or you don't have influence, right? So a boss that you hate, if he comes to you and says, hey, I need you to get this project done by 5 p.m. tonight, you'll do it because you don't want to lose your job. So he's got the authority to do it, but he's lacking the fundamental principles of credibility and influence. Now imagine if a different employer who has been in the business for 20 years, who cares about his employees, who cares about you, who works to serve, who communicates and casts visions effectively. When they mess up, they take ownership of it. Now that person comes to you and says, hey, Joe, I need you to get this assignment done by 5 because ... It's very important. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. Let's just get done what we can. How does that sound? Man, you're now committed. Like you're not complying. You want to do it because you want to make this person happy. You feel good about the relationship you have with this other individual, and you want to be reciprocal in the value that you add because of that person's value added to your life. And that's the difference between compliance and commitment. If I tell my kids, hey, go clean your room, yeah, they're going to do it because there's going to be consequences to it because I'm their father. But if instead I say, hey guys, we keep a clean house because, and I explain those reasons, and we have these conversations all the time, and I'm somebody they trust, then they're like, okay, they're not gonna be happy about it. They're like, okay, my second son's great at this. I'll ask him, I'll put a list of chores. My wife or I will put together a list of chores, or I'll say, hey, I need you to take the boxes out. And he's not happy about it. But he's like, okay, Dad, I'll do it. And then he does it. And then I honor that. Hey, I really appreciate you taking those boxes out and doing it quickly and not throwing up a big fit. You've always been really good about taking care of those things. Okay. My influence level with him and my credibility just went up. Now the authority, let's talk about the authority piece and then we'll wrap this up. Authority is something that all guys are craving. It's just something we want, right? We want to be in leadership positions. We want to be in positions of power. The things that we do are, our aim is to improve our authority in other people's lives or even over people's lives, which is not a great motive. To be over people, to serve people, yes, but to be over people, that's different. There's nuance there. What we need to realize is that the authority is just going to take care of itself over a long period of time. Now, sometimes it's not always going to be a perfect equal relationship between how much credibility you have, how much influence you've garnered, and a direct result of authority. It isn't always going to work out like that, but over time it will. You're going to be passed up for a promotion you deserved. You're going to ask somebody to potentially go on a date or marry you, and it isn't going to work out. You might be credible. You might have influence with that person, but it isn't compatible. And so the authority isn't granted, it's just the way it is. But don't let your authority or lack thereof be a deterrent from trying to build and boost credibility in your own life and the influence you have with others. And have some faith that if you do those things over a long enough and sustained period of time, the authority will be granted. Maybe not the way that you want, maybe not on your timeline, but the authority will definitely be granted. So guys, that's my thoughts. Of course, I go into further detail into the specifics of how to foster influence, credibility, and authority. So please, when it comes out, actually now there's you can pick up a advanced copy of I almost said my old book, Sovereignty, but you can pick up an advanced copy of the Masculinity Manifesto, How Man Establishes Influence, Credibility, and Authority at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever you get books. So please do that. And let's talk more about this, because honestly, we need righteous men who have the levels of influence, credibility, and authority that will get people to move in a positive direction. Because you can have those things and move people in the wrong direction. And so we need to be just as credible, just as influential, if not more so we can steer the ship and we can guide people towards a path that's going to serve them and collectively society as a whole better. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, additional input, ideas, let me know. Take a screenshot, tag me, post it up on Instagram stories or in your feed. Let guys know what you're listening to. Leave a rating review if you would. That goes a long way in boosting us up the ratings and also getting other people to see what it is we're doing. And outside of that, take a look at the Iron Council. we're all talking and working to build influence, credibility, and authority within our own lives and within the lives and the walls of the guys in the Iron Council. You can check that out at orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right, guys, I'll be back on next week. Until then, go out there, take action, build credibility, build influence, build authority, and become the man you are meant to be.